Welcome everyone to day 2 of TLGS 2022. My name is Wendy Doucette from East Tennessee State University. I'll be collecting questions in the chat for this session, which is called Transforming the Publishing Academy: How Moving Online and Focusing on Diversity and Inclusion Made Scholarly Publishing Support More Accessible to Graduate Students.
Hi, my name is Lidiya Grote. I'm a social sciences librarian, and I'm here with two of my colleagues who will introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Latisha Reynolds. I'm Assistant Head of Research Assistance and Instruction, and also Director of DEI Initiatives. And I serve as a liaison to various departments within humanities and social sciences, including social work, Pan-African studies, theater, and religion. And I teach classes and work with graduate students in all of these areas. I would say social work is definitely an area that keeps me most busy.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Howard. I am the business librarian at the University of Louisville. So I'm the liaison to our College of Business here. I do work with undergraduates, and most of the graduate students I work with are MBA students. There's quite a few here. And I also support entrepreneurship PhD students.
Okay, and here's our photos and our contact information. As a social sciences librarian, I work with anthropology, criminal justice, political science, sociology, and psychology departments. And all of us work with in our areas with both undergraduate and graduate student populations, as well as faculty and staff. And we're going to talk a little bit about the University of Louisville, as well as the University of Louisville libraries, and then we'll move on to talking about scholarly literature, establishing the need for publishing support services, and why librarians are well positioned to provide those. And then we'll move on to Publishing Academy and the transformation of it in 2021. So the University of Louisville is a public research university. It's located in the largest metropolitan area of Kentucky, which is Louisville. And it has over 23,000 students, and over 6,500 of those are graduate students. So quite a bit of our student populations are graduate students. What's even more important is the university kind of makes statements and strives for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in its vision statement and its mission statement, it includes, things like celebrating diversity, fostering equity, striving for inclusion, striving to be a premier anti-racist metropolitan research university. And some of those changes, like adding anti-racism and to the mission statement of quite recent, probably about 2 or 3 years ago. And considering the atmosphere following the death of George Floyd, or the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and the Black Lives movement, we've seriously considered including DEI, and we are going to do even more of it in the following publishing academies. So that's kind of important to see how it positions our efforts within the larger college and institution. Next is just a brief overview of our libraries. At the University of Louisville, we have a library system. It includes Ekstrom Library, Kornhauser Health Sciences Library, our archives and special collections, as well as art, law, and music libraries. The library you see on the right hand of the screen is our Ekstrom Library. It serves most of the programs and students on the main campus. Well, it serves all of them, but law students and music students tend to use their specific libraries a little bit more. And within the Ekstrom Library, there's a research assistance and instruction department, which is our large public services department. And all of us work within the department. We provide research and information literacy support. Again, we don't have a graduate library. It's for both graduate and undergraduate student population. within the main programs. And the department is also the department that kind of initiated the partnership with Graduate School to provide the Publishing Academy, as well as coordinated all the biennial there every other year Publishing Academy since its establishment. We have 7 librarians, 3 support staff members, and 1 pretty awesome part-time graduate student. So that's, that's kind of who we are and where we come from. And next, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over some of the literature. There's a lot more kind of establishing the need for graduate student support in terms of publishing and professional and preparation for professional presentations. So in 2014, Alvarez et al. Stated that students pursuing advanced degrees are increasingly expected to contribute to their discipline scholarly discourse during their tenure in graduate school. However, they are often unsure of how or where to begin the publishing process and do not always feel comfortable asking to help from their faculty advisors or fellow students. So on the next slide, we'll kind of talk about how librarians are positioned to help students, but this is sort of the first hint that it tells you, look, sometimes, asking a professor who publishes 5 articles a year and is far removed from, being a graduate student is a little uncomfortable. It feels a little strange, and librarians are kind of in a perfect position to fill that gap and make students feel comfortable. The article itself, from which the quote came, it kind of talked a lot about increased pressure for graduate students to publish. It talked about how publish or perish used to be an idiom that referred only to the junior tenure track faculty who were seeking tenure, and now for any PhD student who is trying to have a career in academic, particularly larger academic institution, it's almost becoming a requirement to publish before seeking job market, not without drawbacks. There's quite a bit of discussion about why increased expectation of publishing during your PhD tenure might or might not be good for students, but that's just where we are with the job market and with the expectations, and we want to make sure that we prepare our students for the careers that they want to pursue. And at the same time, they do, the studies of doctoral programs across the board kind of note that a lot of time the preparation of students for professorate are not well organized. Students are kind of learning how to be faculty by observing their faculty mentors, and they don't always get the publication skills and a full range of research activities overview that they need to successfully pursue the career. And just in general terms, also during the Publishing Academy, we have faculty panels. And what we notice across the years is that faculty do note that the expectations are going up and up. They're becoming higher and higher. And, again, it's not necessarily a good thing, but it's just what the market looks like right now. So we absolutely need to prepare students. And I sort of hinted at that, but why librarians of all the people, why are we positioned to provide those student services? For one, we are not their direct faculty advisors, so students feel much more comfortable asking for those services. And also a study of graduate student services by Vazuri and Kalkugna noted that 68% of the respondents said that they don't have services specific to doctoral graduate students. So a lot of libraries do provide, like citation management or specific tools or specific database tutorials. They provide literature searches. Literature search workshops are very popular. However, Fong noted that publication and presentation sort of, as they mentioned, those are professionalization services represent a higher level of need for the graduate students and librarians it does take investment of time, it takes investment of effort, and we need to learn new skills. But we are well positioned to lead these efforts on campus, and those efforts are likely to be visible and increase library profile on campus. And furthermore, if you, and my colleagues will talk about it, but if you do provide publication services, it kind of necessitates campus partnerships. You have to work with graduate school, potentially with a writing center and multiple entities on campus. You develop stronger relationships on campus, and ACRL guidelines do recommend that libraries get integrated and develop campus-wide partnerships. So that provides an opportunity for having kind of deep relationships with other entities on campus. And lastly, there's many different examples of the scholarly publishing and publishing in peer-reviewed journals in the literature. As early as 2008, at the University of Colorado, Neville wrote about "Publish, Not Perish: The Art of Craft and of Publishing in Scholarly Journals." And that was completely online workshop developed for their junior faculty, but mostly for their PhD and doctoral students. It included 5 modules: an overview of publishing, and then kind of how to generate ideas and how to find a journal to publish it in, and then how to write and prepare manuscript, and then kind of got the last one guided whoever was doing the workshop through the editorial process. And it was not only fully online, it was asynchronous, self-guided. And when they looked at the usage data at that point in time, they noticed that the workshop was very popular locally. So they noticed that people at their institutions at the University of Colorado did use the workshop. But they also noticed that it became popular nationally and internationally as well. And the author stated that it's kind of a really good indicator of the need for that type of service. Well, quite a few years has passed, but as soon as in 2020, so just a year ago, Kraft and Harlow described a creation of, scholarly communications series of workshop at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. And what they noticed is, they didn't just go about creating it. What they have noticed visibly is an increase in questions at the reference desk and research consultations about predatory journals, publishing, copyright. So they figured they'll develop that workshop, and they did. But it was a series of 5. They talked about metrics and research identity management and open access and just scholarly communication basics. And they got a really positive response from the people who came, and they they get questions about when the next one is and how you can sign up. So they're going to grow the program as they are able and when they are able to do so. So there's a really kind of a robust interest in those types of services among students. And when you develop academic publishing and scholarly communications services at the library, and you partner with other institutions, you're going to get you're likely to get a positive response from students. So just to summarize, the literature, and again, it's a very brief overview, kind of establishes general need for publishing support in graduate student populations, and seems to indicate that librarians are, and we do believe the same, are in really good position to help students out in this area. And before we move on to our specific publishing academy at the University of Louisville, I would love to learn a little bit more about what you do at your institution. So we have a Padlet, and I'll briefly show how to use it. Alex will post a link in the chat, so you can just click on it and go to Padlet and just answer what publishing support services, if any, do you offer at your institution. If you prefer, please feel free to just unmute your mic and talk a little bit about your program or post a comment in the chat.
We have a institutional repository, so I certainly encourage graduate students to, put anything that they've written, into the repository so it, can be found by other scholars.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. And we definitely do that too here with our institutional repository. Looks like there's...
Yeah, thank you for posting. We are all looking at the wall. To just add a note for those who are not used to using Padlet, click on the plus sign and type up your response.
This predatory publishing LibGuide, I think that's really interesting. I'd love to see that. If you want to put a link in the chat to that, that sounds great. There's a lot of good ideas and support coming in. And somebody has a scholarly impact department. That's great.
That's nice. I like the OA funds for students.
Oh, that's great too.
Yeah, I think it's great. There's so many institutional repositories coming up as well.
Yeah, help finding journals to submit to. That is really nice.
It looks like a lot of different kinds of workshops too, which is what we'll be talking about here in a minute, or the kinds of sessions we offer in our academy. So it'll be interesting to see what overlap there is and what you all are doing, and if we're doing anything different.
Alex, the
Nice.
word on open access publishing. Just so we are saying. It looks like we are in a great company. Let's spend another, minute or so just posting, because we'll look at the wall. We might borrow some of your ideas as we try to improve our, services for graduate students. But it looks like a lot of you offer a lot of great things.
Definitely. Just to highlight a couple comments in the chat, someone collaborates with the faculty from the Research Consortium on Directory of Journals, and someone else is developing workshops and guides and instruction connecting to scholarly communication, publishing, presenting. And then there's we have Power Publishing once a year, which is a specific series. This is great. And thanks for including links too when you have them. I'm excited to go back through the Padlet later and check everything out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing, everyone, and please keep adding if you'd like. It's exciting to see what everybody is doing. So now we're going to discuss a little bit about the background of the Publishing Academy. So the Publishing Academy has been offered at the University of Louisville since spring of 2016 on a biennial basis. And it's usually about 5 weeks in the spring. And it's a collaboration with the U of L libraries, different areas of our libraries, as well as the graduate school. And our topics have varied, but the goal of the Publishing Academy is to provide graduate students with foundational knowledge and help them navigate the academic publishing landscape. And the Academy has engaged students around a variety of topics, including the evaluation and sourcing of publication venues, adapting coursework for publication, responding to peer review, also understanding journal impact metrics and open access publishers, and also copyright. And we usually have 2 panels as well. one with tenured faculty, and as well as faculty members who are earlier in their careers and non-tenured. And so you may be wondering, how do we transform the Publishing Academy, or how was it different in 2021? So the pandemic obviously played a major part in the reshaping of the Publishing Academy. Classes at U of L and across the country were adapting to a virtual format out of necessity. And past iterations of the Academy were taught face-to-face, where the students and speakers all met together each week. But in 2021, the format changed to be fully online. And we were able to use Blackboard as a platform, which allowed for more interaction virtually. And Blackboard is the platform that we use for classes at the University of Louisville. And so the organizers were able to offer the sessions live while also recording them, for later access. And during the live sessions, the presenters could provide informational links and other materials in real time, as well as distributing the pre and post readings, kind of like the Padlet that we just did. It was nice to just get that information and be able to have it for students to be able to have it for later as well. We also use Blackboard as, as a way to keep organized, like students could access it and get information at a later date or as needed. And so there was expanded accessibility and inclusion as well. The attendees, the session organizers, and the panelists could participate from home without traveling to campus, incurring, parking costs, and also, more importantly, just risking their health at that time, by trying to come in person. So this alleviated a lot of inconveniences. And surprisingly, the number of registrants increased slightly from 11 in 2019 to 15 in 2021. And so this was even during the pandemic, at a time when there was so much going on with our students, and so we were excited to see that they were, wanting to attend, and it provided, some community that at that time I think people were really wanting, because everyone was working and attending classes from home. And I will also say one international student was able to participate as well from outside of the country. So that was another good thing. And then DEI and anti-racism efforts were also prominent, in our minds and hearts, as organizers at that time. So there have been protests around the country against police violence, including the killings of George Floyd and also Breonna Taylor, which hit close to home, given that Ms. Taylor lived in Louisville. And the group wanted to be more intentional about the diversity of the participants, as well as the topics for the Academy. So we wanted to do, some part and try to be more intentional about DEI. And so the committee decided on panel members to invite based on various elements, including the diversity of the subject areas and the areas of research of the panelists, and also race, gender, and nationality were all considered. Of course, we did have to think about who was able to participate, who had the availability to participate at that time. So that those were also factors. And so I will say the organizers also decided to include a presentation and a discussion about diversity, equity, and inclusion in publishing. And so this was a kind of a major new piece. And it was a topic that we believed would be beneficial to students and also create more awareness around the issues. So now I'll go on to talk a little bit about promotion. The librarians sent out letters to their liaison areas to invite faculty members to participate on the panels, and also to encourage student participation. And we also promoted the Academy through U of L Today, which is one of our news outlets for the university, as well as other venues, throughout the library and the university. And the graduate school also did a lot of the promotional heavy lifting because they were able to reach out to graduate students through their outlets as well. So that was very, very helpful. And so now I guess we'll talk a little bit about the individual sessions, that we offered through the Publishing Academy. And Alex is going to discuss the first session, which included the tenure faculty panel.
Great. So first, if you want to go back to that slide, I'll just mention so y'all have an overview of our 5 sessions, and then we'll talk to you a little bit more about which each one was. So our first session was this tenured faculty panel. Our second session discussed journal metrics, copyright, and open access. The third session was about writing for publication and navigating peer review. That was a partnership with our writing center. Session 4 was about early career publishing strategies, which was a non-tenure track or early career faculty panel. And then session 5 was that DEI and scholarly publishing session that Latisha mentioned. So now I'll tell you a little bit more about our first session. So the description that we provided to students for the session is on the screen. And how we started the Publishing Academy was, of course, first by welcoming the students, providing a brief introduction to the libraries, and then we provided an overview of the Academy, discussed our upcoming sessions, and gave some housekeeping notes about our online format and Blackboard. So then we held our tenured faculty panel and ended the session with time for the graduate student participants to introduce themselves and their research interests, and something the students learned or were surprised by from the faculty panel. So we had 5 tenured faculty panelists from across academic units on our panel. So we had someone from computer science and engineering, sociology, philosophy, anthropology, and education. So the panel discussed their own research interests and really walked students through their publishing process, including how they select publication venues, evaluating publication metrics, and advice for responding to peer review and handling, criticism or rejection. So the panelists also gave students advice in terms of their writing process and really helped the students with thinking about how to establish their own writing routines, discussing, how to collaborate with others on their writing and ways in which they can seek feedback on drafts. So another really cool part of this panel was that a lot of the panelists actually served as editors or reviewers for journals. So they were able to offer, valuable insight about what's important to them when selecting manuscripts for publication and what advice they have for prospective authors. So in keeping with our focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion in this iteration of our Publishing Academy, panelists were also asked to discuss what DEI issues in research and scholarly publishing are currently being discussed in their fields, and what steps are being taken to respond to these issues or to support DEI in their disciplines. So that was, a definite focus and a question that we brought to this panel. So I will turn it back to Latisha to talk about our second session of the Academy.
All right, so the second session was focused on journal metrics, identifying journals, and copyright. And this session was really packed with information. It included instruction examples and discussion around journal metrics and best practices for assessing journal value and impact, as well as choosing journals for publication. And we also provided demos of tools such as Ulrich's Periodicals Directory, Insights Journal Citation Reports, and resources on our subject guides page to equip students with information needed to make the best judgment about journal quality. We also showed journal matching tools like EndNote, Manuscript Matcher, Springer Journal Selector, and Elsevier Journal Finder. So we also introduced those and showed how you could take your your working title or abstract and input that into those tools in order to be matched with possible journals. And we also had discussion about potentially predatory publishers or low quality journals, and about how the open access journal system can be manipulated for profit. And this then led nicely into a presentation by our open access repository coordinator, Sarah Frankel, and she spoke about open access and also shared information about U of L Thinker, which is our university repository. Our theses and dissertations are held in that repository, as well as other student works. And so we thought this would be, helpful information for students, especially given also the popularity of open access materials right now. And finally, we had a presentation by U of L's Endowed Chair for Scholarly Communication, who's Dwayne Butler, and he spoke about copyright and authors' rights. And so I'll say the session was very well received by the students, but the sessions were a bit shorter this time, which meant less time for the hands-on searching in the databases and using the tools, whereas previous iterations of the Academy allowed more time for this. But we still think the students got a lot out of it. And I just saw a question, wanted to know what the journal tools were. I'll go back and so Ulrich's Periodicals Directory, and then Insights Journal Citation Reports, so JCR. And then I don't know if you wanted the journal matching tools as well, but EndNote, Manuscript Matcher, Springer Journal Selector, and then Elsevier Journal Finder were the others. Okay, and so just a little about the third session. The director of the U of L Writing Center, Bronwyn Williams, discussed writing for publication and navigating peer review. And this session gave students an understanding of the differences or the nuances between writing produced for class assignments and writing produced for the purpose of publication. And best practices for adapting research or coursework for publication was also discussed, as well as revising a manuscript based on comments from peer reviewers. And some of the feedback from students, they really seem to appreciate learning more about, working with peer reviewers and, responding to those comments. And one student mentioned that it really alleviated a lot of anxiety for them around writing and publishing. And I think also that session worked, along with the faculty panels, where some of these discussions also came up. Now, Alex will talk about the non-tenured faculty panel.
Great, yeah. So session 4 was a panel of either early career or non-tenure track faculty. And we had 4 panelists, and they were from business, education, geography, and English. And the panelists really focused on how important research and publication is in the academic job market, which I think was really relevant for our graduate students. So the panelists discussed the process for selecting which journals to publish in, and really stressed the importance of publishing in prestige journals in their field. They shared tips about their writing process and responding to peer review. And a few of the panelists also discussed their process for turning their dissertations into publications. So the panelists told students that to be competitive today in the job market, they're going to need to have at least 2 and maybe even 3 published articles on their CV. So the panelists really encouraged the graduate students to strategize about how they can finish grad school with publications. One of the panelists was a recent PhD graduate, which I think was really helpful. And she shared advice that her advisor encouraged her to do really anything she could to get published, including writing book reviews. So the quote included here on the screen is from a geography professor on the panel. And she offered that even if students aren't able to have 3 publications before they finish grad school, it's important that they be able to demonstrate their promise for publication in the job market. So they really stress that students be able to talk about their research interests, share their works in progress, and even indicate their works in progress on their CV, and discuss which journals they plan to publish in. That was all important to be able to do in those academic interviews. So another interesting topic that came up on the panel that hadn't been discussed as much in previous iterations of the Academy was this idea of public scholarship. So early career faculty shared about how publishing in non-academic venues like blogs, newspapers, magazines really help to generate buzz about their scholarship and about who they are as a scholar, and develop broader interest in their work and really build connections. So while the focus and highest importance was certainly on publishing in prestige scholarly journals, this idea of public scholarship was another interesting angle for the grad students to explore. And I see a question about why specifically non-tenure track here. Great question. It could have been either. I think that sometimes maybe early career faculty struggle getting on the tenure track, so that was part of it. Our recent PhD grad, for example, was a term faculty, so not a tenure track faculty. And I think research interests and publishing is also different. So like, for example, the clinical faculty we had on this panel really talked about looking for journals more focused on teaching and pedagogy rather than like their own research, if that makes sense. So I might save some of these questions to the end. I just saw that one, but we will have time to answer all the questions at the end. So I will now talk about our final session, last but certainly not least. And this was titled Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Scholarly Publishing. So this was led by our diversity resident at the time, Renisha Chandler. She was our diversity resident librarian. And the chart included here demonstrates the lack of diversity in publishing. And it was really used to situate why this is a vital topic. So what this is showing is in the publishing industry overall, the vast majority of publishers or people being published are white, straight, non-disabled, cisgender women. So So the session really discussed various systemic barriers that may prevent scholars from marginalized communities being published. And some of those included privileged policies, inappropriate gatekeeping, and the formality of the process itself. So initiatives to increase diversity in scholarly publishing were also discussed in this session. And some of those ideas and initiatives included internships and fellowships, demographic data tracking, publishing fee waivers, and supporting non-native English-speaking authors. A major initiative aimed at increasing diversity in scholarly publishing that was discussed in this session were organizations and task forces like the Coalition for Diversity and Inclusion in Scholarly Communication. So we're going to share the link to that organization in the chat, and we encourage everyone, if you're not already familiar with that organization, to look it up. Basically, this coalition was formed in 2017, and its mission is to work with organizations and individuals to build equity, inclusion, diversity, and accessibility in scholarly communications. So I guess the final thing to note about this session, so we talked about, barriers, initiatives, and we also discussed some current trends for DEI in scholarly publishing. So things like open access, and also embedding equity and inclusion in journal mission statements. So that's our overview of the sessions. And now I'll tell you a little bit more about our student attendance. So we had 15 students registered for the Spring 2021 Academy from across campuses, academic units, and disciplines. So I won't read all these, but you can see each of these departments listed is actually just one student from each, except for entrepreneurship. We had 2 PhD entrepreneurship students in attendance. So as you can see, this was really a fantastic interdisciplinary group of graduate students. And as Latisha mentioned earlier, our number of registrants increased from 11 in 2019 to 15 in 2021. And the highest attendance for the Publishing Academy was actually the first iteration of the Academy in 2017. And there were 17 students then, but this year we did have the highest number of academic disciplines represented. So as we said in the beginning, the Publishing Academy is a partnership between the university libraries and the graduate school of our university. And the graduate school is responsible for the formal evaluation of the academy. So students are asked to assess each individual session, and they also complete a final evaluation. So after each session, students are asked to give a numerical rating for things like facilitator interaction, session quality, and other factors that are up here on the screen, like ideas I can try immediately and feeling valued and supported as a graduate student. The students are also asked to provide qualitative feedback after each session. So questions are asking the students, what aspect of the session they found most useful, what could be improved, and what the students will do with what they learned in that session. So in the final evaluation, still on that slide, students rate their self-reported familiarity with publishing knowledge in a post-academy assessment. So the students are also asked to complete a pre-academy assessment with the same questions, and comparing those two, we definitely saw a significant increase in publishing knowledge after the students completed the academy. So at the completion of the academy, the graduate school is really great. They're a great partner. They send us in the libraries a detailed assessment report, and that includes an executive summary with highlighting recommendations, participant demographics, the final reflection qualitative data, and then the compiled data for each individual session. All right, so now I'll talk about impact. So what was the impact of the Spring 2021 Publishing Academy? And really, how did our moving online and focusing on DEI make scholarly publishing more accessible for grad students? So we think these 2 quotes here from the student evaluations really help illustrate the impact. The first says that These sessions help make the process of publishing relatable and in turn help to reduce imposter syndrome. My own anxieties now look like common worries even among more experienced writers. It is now a necessary part of the process rather than a large hurdle. So I think this student really sums up what we hoped the Publishing Academy would do, especially with having a more intentional focus on DEI. So we want to make scholarly publishing more relatable and accessible to graduate students. And to hear that the sessions help to reduce imposter syndrome for even one student shows us that we're on the right track. Now, the comments are anonymous, so we don't know the identity of the student who left this comment, but the hope is that the more that we can bring a lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion to publishing academies, the more this imposter syndrome can be reduced and we can take positive steps forward towards correcting the diversity imbalance in publishing. So we believe that moving the Academy online did make the Publishing Academy more accessible to students. We had a student from Brazil in attendance. We had students from our different campuses in attendance. So being online really made access to the Publishing Academy more equitable to all students. But that being said, we received feedback that our impact could be even greater by taking it a step further. So the next quote says, by having it as a synchronous live event and having the requirement that you must attend 4 out of the 5 sessions live, you are unnecessarily reducing the likelihood that participants can complete the Academy. So while we think, holding the Academy online increased equitable access, this student challenged us to think more about holding the Academy asynchronously versus synchronously. And that may have even greater impact and be even more accessible because it would increase the likelihood that more graduate students can participate and can complete the Academy. So we went from only holding the Academy live and in person to pivoting online and continuing to hold the sessions live. And we received some different feedback. We heard that students wanted more time for interaction with each other. And also this feedback that students wanted to be able to attend asynchronously. So this gives us a lot of food for thought for the next iteration of the Academy. That leads me to talk about our next steps on how we want to improve the Academy moving forward. So first is we want to continue to build on DEI content. We think it's important that we be even more intentional in our DEI focus. So how can we integrate a framework of diversity, equity, and inclusion into every phase of the Academy, from planning to promotion to the sessions and to evaluation? So while we considered panelist diversity this year, we want to continue to build and expand upon that next year because we really believe it's important that as many students as possible see themselves reflected in scholarly publishing. So we're also going to increase session length. I did see a question earlier in the chat about this. So we actually decided to shorten sessions this time for the online format to an hour. But based on feedback from students, we're going to go back to longer sessions. With the shorter session, there was not as much time for hands-on learning, and we heard from the students that that was really important to them. So our plan moving forward is for these sessions to be an hour and a half, which will give more time for activities and interaction. And we're also considering developing a longer version of the Academy with 2 parts, so one in the fall and one in the spring. And another idea is to expand our partnerships for these academies. So as Lidiya mentioned in the beginning, in the literature really focuses on how important partnerships are for graduate student support. So our partnership with the graduate school is fantastic, and we definitely want that to continue. The Writing Center is another one of our partners, and they have one of the most highly rated sessions each year. But we want to continue to be creative in how we can develop partnerships that will provide the best experience to our graduate students. So a couple ideas are to invite librarians from our health sciences campus to work with us, since there are students from their campus in the Academy, and we would love their participation and ideas. And another idea is to work with our data librarian for a data visualization workshop. This is something we get a lot of questions about increasingly from graduate students. So we would love to be able to offer a workshop specifically about data visualization. And we've also talked about potentially expanding the Publishing Academy for undergraduate students because our institution is really placing a big emphasis on undergraduate research. And finally is this question of hybrid or asynchronous, and we really need to decide the format for the Publishing Academy moving forward. As I said, we saw that transitioning to online helped provide more equitable access to graduate students. We also heard that students want more opportunities to engage and interact. And we heard that to make the Academy more accessible, we need to offer asynchronous options. So we're really going to need to think about how we can respond to all that feedback and really offer a format for these sessions that will be most inclusive and most accessible to our grad students moving forward. So our idea right now is to have the next Publishing Academy be fully accessible online, while also offering in-person options for the first and last session. So we have another Padlet. Looking at the time, we can start taking questions and answering questions, and I'll turn it over to Lydia for the Padlet if we have time to do that.
If this presentation gave you some ideas of what kind of publishing support can you imagine using at your institution, in addition to what you already have, Alex will post a link to the Padlet. Please share with us because we are trying to learn how to do things better, but we do want to make sure that we have enough time to answer the questions that have been asked and to give you an opportunity to ask us questions as well. Any questions?
Y'all have taken my job on asking questions. I see only one new question that you haven't answered yet. And it's, does anyone organize anything like that for faculty?
We have not done that. We are looking at extending our scholar services, and hopefully we can do something for people who are on tenure track and have more detailed services for that. But there's nothing that is currently happening for faculty. I know the provost used to have half a day workshops where they for scholarly productivity for faculty, and I attended a couple of that. It wasn't librarian led, but they had editors from different journals and people who publish heavily talk to faculty once a year. But definitely an extended service would be really good for faculty, and the literature does support it.
And I will say that I had just kind of recently started as a librarian and tenure track faculty during this Publishing Academy. So it was really helpful, even for me. So I do think that's a great idea. And that comes with a lot of new partnerships as well that we could explore for doing something like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree. That is a great idea. And hopefully we'll be able to do some of those things in the future. I have worked with individual professors who are faculty who may be, I don't know, working across disciplines with teams or other people in other areas, and they may not be as familiar with the journals, the top journals for those areas. So I have worked individually with some of those faculty, and they, it seems like a service or a workshop that would be really needed. So thanks for bringing that up.
I've got one new question in chat.
Do you find a lot of interest in pedagogy?
And pedagogy publishing, I lost my place too.
I see it. So you find a lot of interest in pedagogy publishing in addition to discipline publishing?
Alex kind of mentioned during our non-tenure and early career panel, people did talk about the need for an interest in, sometimes it's called a scholarship of teaching and learning publishing, because you can study your own classroom in your own environment while your teaching load is heavy. You can still see if implementing certain intervention in your classroom or certain activities in your classroom or using open textbook, anything like that, affects student outcomes in terms of grades and such. Generally as a practitioner and as a librarian, I think scholarship of teaching and learning how students learn is very, 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 very vital and important. Since that is one of our major, as a public institution, any publicly funded university, one of our major tasks is to help students learn how to learn and to be lifelong learners.
And I do see some clarification that the question was really more among the students. And I would say that really varies depending on the student's discipline. And that's one thing with these publishing academies is they're so interdisciplinary that I think it's really important to address both. And so I would say for our education students, there may be more interest in the pedagogy publishing in addition to the discipline publishing. And correct me if I'm wrong, Latisha or Lidiya, but I would say most of the focus of students is maybe on more of the discipline publishing.
No, you are right, because if you have health sciences or an entrepreneur student, most of our students were kind of focused on their disciplinary publishing.
You're all caught up. I think we have time for one last question if anyone wants to ask one. I had several questions myself. You answered everything.
Oh, great. And thanks for including your thoughts on the Padlet. I'm looking at it over here. Oh, another question.
Is there a certificate at the end? Yes, the graduate school deals with the application process. The students have to get kind of a short letter of support from their advisor, just to make sure that they are not overreaching, because publishing academy does require some work from students. We do try not to make it too much work. And if they attend at least 4 out of 5 sessions, they do get a certificate from the graduate school.
Interesting.
And the last one is, I wonder if subtle publishing would be a way for graduate students to highlight their teaching for the job market. I assume for teaching assistants, people who are graduate teaching assistant GTA, it would be a great way to highlight their teaching abilities and publish an article and their innovative pedagogy. It will probably help their teaching statement in a job market when they're writing one for a 10-year position. And I think we're pretty much done. The last slide is just the references. What our reference and literature review is on here, and we are really running out of time. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you all.